بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يدبر الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره ألف سنة مما تعدون صدق الله العظيم. Dear friends, it's probably our third or fourth week since the lockdown, and this is likely to continue for another few weeks. And it has beginning to affect many of us now, and it is becoming difficult to continue in an environment where masajid are not accessible, and to remain steadfast is proving to be a lot more difficult than what it was a month ago. And it has definitely been difficult since the start of the first lockdown from March last year. The effect and the after effect is likely to probably go on for Allah knows how long. But we need to remind ourselves that whatever happens, it will happen as Allah Azza wa Jal wishes it to be, as Allah Azza wa Jal decrees it to be. The ayat that's read before you from Surah Al-Sajdah, there the meaning is that Allah Azza wa Jal decides what happens to people, and His plan works well in advance. So what is happening today may have been decided thousands of years ago. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, what He decides, He doesn't decide for an individual. Not only for an individual, but His general plan is for the universe. The verse that I just read, in this verse, the meaning is that the plan works for almost every plan is given out and it's designed, and the climate is set for, and these climates, the way things happen, it is set for 1,000 years. According to some Mufassirin, according to some scholars of tafsir, whenever Allah Azza wa Jal, there is a kind of a trend developed, the trend planned, and that's planned for almost over 1,000 years in advance. So everything happens in that kind of pocket of that 1,000 years. So everything is connected that happens during that time span. So that is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way things happen is Allah says خلق السماوات والأرض في ستة أيام ثم استوى على العرش يدبر الأمر. Allah Azza wa Jal يدبر الأمر. He plans the affairs, He manages the affairs, and what happens on the planet, in the universe, is planned by, decreed by, approved by, managed by the Almighty Allah. In another ayah, خلق السماوات والأرض and then يدبر الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره ألف سنة مما تعدون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets a scene for the people to live through, and in that scene, through that train that Allah ta'ala has set, people they live through it, and then their conduct and their response and their reaction is then it is observed, it's recorded, and in accordance to that the future is determined. So يدبر الأمر, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses that people should prosper for a period of time. So what happens is that the prosperity prevails on the planet. Everyone's well off, everybody's enjoying, everybody's happy, and in that happiness and in that age of prosperity and comfort, people's conduct they are taken into account, and whichever way they behave, then that's how the future is, then the outcome, then it takes shape. So sometimes you're living through a difficult period, sometimes you're going through an age of hardship, and you feel that this is proving to be more difficult than I can bear, but you do not realize that your conduct is shaping the future. Your conduct is shaping the future. Your steadfastness is making an impact on what will happen to the future generations. Today, if you remain steadfast, the future generations will reap the reward. And if you today give up, then the future generations will have to then suffer. So you need to show some steadfastness. And this didn't happen only for this age, for the 21st century. It's not only for this age that me and you are living through. Our predecessors, our elders, they went through the same. Allah Ta'ala in the Quran talks about the Anbiya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the prophets. He talks about communities. He talks about people, generations. And what happened, if you just have a glance over what you did in the Quran Kareem, probably it will become a bit easier. The story of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. If you think about what happened to Musa alayhi salam, what happened to his people, there was a time when Yaqub alayhi salam, and I hope that the story that I'm relating to, most of you are able to recall that Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam was in Canaan, in Palestine, somewhere. And there they had religious prominence. They were important in terms of leadership, in terms of prophethood and divine approval. But in terms of worldly material matters, they weren't the kings. And from there, Allah Ta'ala brought Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam not as a trader, but as a slave. And he didn't come as an educated and as an experienced young man or an aged person. He came as a child, vulnerable. You compare this with Ismail alayhi salam being vulnerable and Hajira alayhi salam being vulnerable in Mecca. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought Yusuf alayhi salam as a vulnerable to Egypt. And then in Egypt, few years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, he was sitting on the throne. And Yaqub alayhi salam and the other children, they follow suit. So was anybody aware that when Yusuf was being brought, when he was being put in the well, and then when he was being brought to Egypt, this would be a sign, or this would be an opening of a new chapter of prosperity for the family, that they were going to be the future kings of Egypt. Nobody in their wildest dreams had ever imagined that. But the plan of Allah Azza wa Jal, very in a subtle way, was working behind the scenes, and this was happening. And those very people who had been through the early years of hardship and difficulty and poverty in Canaan, 40 years later, they were the elites and the ruling class of Egypt. They were the backbone of the elite. And the elites of Egypt, they were competing against one another to win their approval. And this is how the plan of Allah Azza wa Jal works. And then the same family, few generations later, few centuries later, the same people. Now that was one child without any experience comes to Egypt and becomes the king and the ruler. And the same family, when it flourishes and expands and they gain strength and they have experience and they have influence, suddenly they find themselves being targeted and persecuted. Their children were not allowed to live. Their boys were being massacred, butchered, slaughtered in front of their mums and in front of their parents. And their places of worship were destroyed. And they couldn't go to a place to worship. And these people were living through it, and they were bearing the brunt of it, and they could do nothing. And they were making sure that the elites and the rulings, their persecutors, the oppressors, were making sure that there was no glimmer of hope for the future of these people. They would not get anyone who would become their leader and under whose leadership they were ever able to rise. And these plans were being monitored and they were put in place. And this was going on. They couldn't even dream that they would have a leader in the future who would be able to lead them out of that mess. They had no access to better education. So they had no access to having any experience of how to administer the royal affairs and how to manage the country or the society. They were denied all such access. and the doors were shut on them. And the plan of Allah Azza wa Jalla was working behind the scene. Musa alayhi salam was born, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took Musa alayhi salam to the very heart of that palace, where he would get that education which others couldn't even dream of, and where he would get those experiences which others couldn't even think of. And this was happening, and it happened. And Musa alayhi salatu wasalam ended up in palace. He had the royal upbringing, the best tutors, the best trainers, the most experienced academics. They were there to serve Musa alayhi salam and to educate him. He was a prince, and he had the education that he needed, and he had that upbringing that he deserved. And then Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, from there, now because he was going to be a Nabi, Allah Azza wa Jal wanted him to have that experience as well. So that very same prince who was very authoritative, who people couldn't even look into his eyes, and people couldn't dare challenge, this very prince now had to flee for his life. So he was forced to travel to Madian. There he had to spend 10 years as a shepherd, looking after the goats and the sheep. Could anybody have ever imagined that this person would ever return to the time of glory, the time of prosperity and comfort? Could anybody ever imagine that? No, this was something that nobody ever dream of. And Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, then 10 years later, Allah Ta'ala sends him back. He returns to Egypt. Now this time Allah says to him, go to Pharaoh and speak to him in a gentle tone. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Now he's coming to warn Pharaoh. And the very time and the very leadership that Israelites needed, that was born, and that was now ready to deliver. And then Allah Azza wa Jal, at the hand of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, he rescued people that were previously being persecuted, and they were previously being targeted, and they were rescued, and they were brought back. They were granted freedom, and the oppressors and the tyrants, they drowned in the ocean. This Allah Ta'ala says, كَمْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ إِنَّهُمْ جُنْدٌ مُغْرَقُونَ. That was an army that was meant to be drowned. And then Allah says, كَمْ تَرَكُوا مِنْ جَنَّاتٍ وَعُيُونٍ وَزُرُوعٍ وَمَقَامٍ كَرِيمٍ وَنَعْمَةٍ كَانُوا فِيهَا فَاكِهِينَ ثُمَّ أَوْرَثْنَاهَا قَوْمًا آخَرِينَ فَمَا بَكَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّمَاءُ وَالْأَرْضُ وَمَا كَانُوا مُنظَرِينَ. Allah Ta'ala describes that the whole scene, that how Allah Azza wa Jal made the army of Pharaoh leave behind all those palaces, the magnificent things that they had built, and the beautiful gardens where they used to enjoy. They left them behind, and they came to their place where they were meant to be drawn. It wasn't a flood like Nuh alayhi salam's time that just that overpowered them, or Saylul Arim in Yemen area. It wasn't like another flood from the dam. These people, they came to the ocean to be drowned. And this is the plan of Allah Azza wa Jal, which works when he intends to destroy someone. He brings him to the place of his destruction. And when Allah Azza wa Jal wants someone to flourish, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he then takes him to the heart and to the center of the trouble, and there he makes him survive. And that the very tools that were created to destroy that individual, they become subservient, and they become means and tools to protect him and to help him flourish. So this is yudabbirul amr. This is the plan of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is how he manages the earth, and this is how he manages the affair. So if you're stuck at home now, if you're stuck at home because of the pandemic, there's nobody to help you, nobody to talk to, nobody to reach. No, you can't socialize with anyone, and you're struggling. Some of you, probably this situation serves them better. They are rolling in money. Their businesses are doing very well. They have time to do things that they could never do, and they could never dream of that they would ever have time to do these things. They're very happy at home, and they're doing really well. And others are really struggling. They struggle to even put enough food on their table. This is the plan of Allah Azza wa Jal. whatever he puts it helps someone, it puts someone in a better situation, helps someone rise, and it forces the others to go down. But don't lose heart because of it. Do not become worried because of it. This will not help you at all. Instead, if you are struggling, then lift your hands in dua and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to help you, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to rescue you. If you think that you have nowhere to go to, there's nothing that you can do, remember the example of Ayyub alayhi salatu wassalam. He was unwell, and there was no medicine would cure his ailment and his disease. And him too. No physician was prepared to visit him and to prescribe him some medicine. And this Ayyub alayhi salatu wassalam, when he turned to his Lord and he said, Rabbi inni mastani al-dhurru wa anta arhamur rahimin. And when he turned to Rabbi inni mastani shaitanu bi nusubin wa adhab, he turned to Allah Azza wa Jal. It has become very difficult for me. He didn't go into depression. He yet had hope. And when he turned to Allah with dua, what did Allah say? Allah didn't say travel 1,000 miles south and there you'd find a Hakim and he'll cure you. Allah said, where you are, urkud bi rijlik. Rub your feet on the floor, on the ground where you are. Hada mughtasal. Rub your feet, and there comes out water, and this water is your cure. Have a rinse, wash yourself, drink from this water, and that'll cure and take away all your diseases. And that remedy Allah gave him at home. Ismail alayhi salam's mother, she's helpless in Mecca, and Ismail, that little baby, the infant baby, I don't think he was even a year old. And Allah says that baby, when he rubbed his feet on the floor, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Zamzam come out of it. And Maryam, at the time of birth of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, O Maryam, shake the trunk of the tree that you're sitting underneath, the fresh date will fall on you. So this is Allah, that when He plans to deliver you out of some difficulty, then the solution comes and knocks at your door and comes and sits in your feet, and then all you do is just pick it up from there. So you may be struggling, but not worse than Ayyub. You may be helpless, but not more than Hajar and Ismail. These stories are there for us to take heed, and these stories are there for us to draw benefit from. So turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. If you're struggling, turn to Allah Azza wa Jal and say, Allahumma kfini bihalalika an haramik wa aghnini bifadlika amman siwak. Oh Allah, grant me sufficient halal that keeps me away from your haram, and grant me your provision so I do not need to turn to and go to anyone other than you. Turn to Allah with dua, and Allah's rahmat will rescue you, and Allah's rahmat will deliver you. وَإِذَا الشَّدَائِدُ أَقْبَلَتْ بِجُنُودِهَا وَالدَّهْرُ مِنْ بَعْدِ الْمَسَرَّةِ أَوْجَعَكَ فَارْفَعْ يَدَيْكَ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ فَفَوْقُهَا رَبٌّ إِذَا نَادَيْتَهُ مَا ضَيَّعَكَ. Above the heavens is a Lord. When you call upon Him, He'll never let you go to waste. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us tawfiq to remember, and may Allah Azza wa Jal deliver us from this situation where we are, and may Allah Azza wa Jal again bring us happy and safe into our masajid, where we worship together, where we again create that environment which makes us strong. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this happen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam ar-rahman ala habibihi sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.